You were trying to get into CIA.
Yeah, as Vladimir Putin reminded me. I don't know how you knew that.
With the backing of whom?
With the backing of CIA, of course. The organization you wanted to join back in the day.
Yeah, I applied to CIA when I was a senior in college.
What did you want to do for the CIA?
Operations. They sent me a letter, so bring a #1 pencil. And one of them was, I am fascinated by fire. You'd have to be a lunatic to say yes, because you're clearly a psycho, right? I'm not ashamed to say any of this. I'm not some secret agent or something. Then immediately after that, went to work for the US government and worked in and around the US government for like the next 35 years.
What was he doing in government?
He went in to run something called Voice of America. And the idea was he'd been a journalist. This was in the Reagan administration. And this was our sort of voice to the world. Voice of America was like the big radio broadcaster. It was really an instrument of the intel agencies, which I didn't quite realize at the time. But so he ran that for years. And
was this Mockingbird by chance?
I mean, I don't know. What's so funny is you don't get things as a child, and I so revered and respected and do revere and respect my father that I don't know, but I have no idea. But I know that when the Iran-Contra thing happened, he got caught up in that. Sort of. I mean, I was in boarding school, I guess, when that happened. But I remember reading, and it was like my dad's name, like, what? Broadcasting messages on behalf of the Contras or something like that. And I remember saying to my father, like, what? And he's like, oh, it's all bullshit. Probably not all bullshit. Whatever. Anyway, just a wonderful man. I had lunch with him every week of my adult life. I always had lunch with him every Friday. And we'd gamble for lunch. Always bring dice and we'd gamble and ate at the same place, same table for decades. And just a great guy, very earthy, extremely powerful life force. The one story that's sort of, not to go on about it, I've often thought about writing a book about it because it was so unusual. But then I was like, I don't want to do that because it's too personal. But this was my father in one short story. When I was in college, I think I was a junior in college, he had been snoring, and my stepmom said, you're snoring. My father's a big man, prone to overeating, just like me. And he was snoring really bad. And she's finally like, you got to go to there's something going on with your snoring. And he hates going to the doctor. He's like, the only one of his friends still alive, he never went to the doctor, smoked unfiltered cigarettes his whole life. He was like, he's fine, I'm fine. He's that guy. So he finally goes to the doctor, and the doctor looks down his throat and goes, holy shit, and gives him an emergency tracheotomy in the examining room because he had such a huge tumor in his throat. And he was such a heavy smoker, they're like, you got throat cancer. Well, it turned out to be tuberculosis that he caught in China, but they didn't know that at the time. So I get a call at school, your father has throat cancer, and he's in surgery. So I'm in school, I was in college, I was in Connecticut. I fly down to Washington. I get to the hospital just as my father's getting out of the recovery room. My stepmom's there, was really the kindest person I've ever met, and really a great person. He really loved her. And so he's getting wheeled out, and he's in this gurney, and he's got, of course, so he can't talk. He's got a hole in his throat. He's recovering from surgery, and my brother and I are there, like, trying to keep from, crying in front of my dad, but like, our dad's dying. He's got throat cancer. Holy shit. It was out of nowhere. And he sees us, and he, was like, hey, guys, like, we can't talk. Hey, guys. And he looks down, and he sees his wife. And he sees her. I'm watching his face. He sees her butt, and he just reaches out and grabs her butt. I just thought, he's just an animal. It's like he's just learned that he's going to die of throat cancer, but he just couldn't control himself. And I saw that, and I said to my brother, it's like, that man is the strongest life force of anyone I've ever met. And he's just, you can't defeat him. Doesn't matter. I mean, he could be in prison and he'd still be the same man. So I don't know why, that the strength of spirit required to grab your wife's butt when you get out of throat surgery. I just think it's just an incredible illustration of who he is. So anyway, I admire him.
What kind of stuff were you into as a kid? Were you into sports or outdoors?
I love the outdoors, and we went, we spent the summer in this little town in Maine. So weird that we did that. We're the only people who went from La Jolla, California to Western Maine, which is not fashionable at all. But my father had gone there as a child on hunting trips with his adopted father, so he liked it. So we went there. But we lived on the beach, so I was into surfing. I was passionately into marijuana, as you are when you grow up in Southern California in the 70s and 80s. I think it's stupid now, but I was into it then. I loved reading. There was a huge premium on reading in our house, like read books. I remember my father once said of my mother, that like the one criticism he leveled against my real mother, who was smart, actually after she died in France, I didn't know she lived in France, but she died, and all this drama happened after she died. But the point is, I got a couple of like correspondence from her, whatever. I really didn't know much about her, but I got all this correspondence. This was 13 years ago when she died. And I was like, wow, she was really smart. I didn't quite realize that. And so I said to my father, like, wow, I got all this correspondence from her real mother, and she's a pretty high IQ person. Wow, I didn't know that. And he goes, yeah, she read magazines. It's like the most, like, she read magazines. Like, what a waste. You know what I mean? She read magazines. Like, it was the New Yorker, but it's just a magazine. Wow. Like, people read books. Like, serious people read books. So, and I'm the beneficiary of his library, which was vast, and the word eclectic is overused, but it literally is eclectic. It's like crazy. And just every interesting book ever actually read and underlined, like these are not decorative books. These are like books he read.
Wow.
On every topic, and not just books, but like transcripts of trials. He's very interested in a couple of topics, and really like American Indians. He's really interested in the Indian Wars and on different tribes. He knew a lot about it. Passionately interested in the Lincoln assassination for some reason, and had the transcripts of, Mrs. Surratt's trial. And like actually the transcript, like bound from 1865, and just a lot of stuff like that. And he's like in a more honest world, he would qualify, I think, as a historian. But anyway, yeah, she read magazines. It's so funny.
Wow.
That's the meanest thing. She was like addicted to drugs and she abandoned her family. She read magazines.
If I remember correctly, you were trying to get into CIA.
Yeah, as Vladimir Putin reminded me. I don't know how you knew that. Yeah, I applied to CIA when I was a senior in college.
What did you want to do for the CIA?
Operations. Yeah, it was completely different organization. Well, who knows what it was, actually? I don't know. I mean, I was operating on the basis of a lot of my father's friends served as operations officers. Some really wonderful guys, who I guess I probably shouldn't name, but who were always at our house and were just legit interesting people and smart people. But, everything changed after 9/11. You worked for CIA, so I don't need to tell you. But I think that the explicit paramilitary part was much smaller. And these were like spycraft guys, a lot of them, probably involved in, who knows what they're involved in, but they were definitely literate and smart and interesting. And they lived in all these countries, and we had just traveled a lot. And my dad was really interested in the world, and we never like went to Florence or something. We always would go to weird places, and he was just interested in how people lived in different cultures and learning about them, and he's just interested in everything.
Hey folks, our friends at Tractor Supply have always stood for community, for neighbors helping neighbors, and for the people who keep life out here moving forward. And at the heart of every community are the heroes who serve, the veterans, active duty military, first responders, and the families who stand beside them. These are the folks who answer the call, who protect, who sacrifice. And Tractor Supply believes that deserves more than just a thank you. That's why they created the Hometown Heroes program. It's their way of giving back in meaningful, everyday ways. As a hometown hero, you'll enjoy special perks through Neighbors Club, like earning rewards on every purchase, free trailer rentals and delivery, and exclusive savings on holidays that honor your service. And the best part? Once you sign up and verify through ID.me, it's automatic. No hoops, no hassles. So if you or someone you love is a hometown hero, visit tractorsupply.com/hometownheroes to learn more. It's Tractor Supply's way of standing behind those who always stand for us.
Amazing teacher. So these guys had lived that life. They had been there when this happened or that happened, or you'd been, chief of station in Jerusalem or something. It's like these guys had really lived a life. And I thought, I want to live that life. I want an interesting life. That's what I wanted. I want an interesting life. And we grew up in a pretty affluent circumstances, not crazy private plane rich or anything, but, I didn't worry about money. That wasn't really a factor. No one ever talked about money, which is one of the privileges of having it. You don't talk about it. And in our culture, you don't talk about it at all under any circumstances. So I didn't really think about money at all. I was just like, I want an interesting life. So I applied to CIA, and that whole application process then, this was 1990. And I should just say, for the record, that I had no idea what the CIA was, actually. And I didn't believe any of I think Kermit Roosevelt actually lived right down the street from us.
Are you kidding?
No.
Oh, man, that's cool.
But I didn't know. I mean, but that was just the world you live in Northwest DC. Like, I never thought any of it was bad. And the people who did think it was bad were like these fervid left-wing America haters. And I was like, fuck those people. Like, they're all Noam Chomsky type. They don't know anything. And I was a child, and I was just dismissive. And the Cold War was going on. So it was really a binary. It was like, are you for the U.S. or the Soviet Union? Well, that was not a hard one for us. We're for the United States. And so when I applied to CIA, and I've taken a lot of crap, including from Putin, like, oh, you're from a CIA family. Well, yeah, obviously my father worked in conjunction with CIA. I mean, that's what that is. And I tried to join the CIA, but I'm not being false about it. I am a sworn enemy of the CIA at this point, no doubt about that. I've been the target, actually, repeatedly. So, I'm not ashamed to say any of this. I'm not some secret agent or something. And I would have been terrible as an operations officer because I'm not good at keeping secrets. I hate bureaucracy. I just wanted a life that was interesting. I wanted to see stuff. I didn't want to run anything. I still don't. I just wanted to see stuff. I wanted to end my life at the table with my children and say, I was there. I was actually there when that happened, and it was interesting. And like the version you've heard is not quite right because I was there. That's what I wanted out of my life. And I got it, but in another way. So I got dinged from CIA for drugs. I'll just be totally honest. I had done cocaine within the last calendar year because I was in college and I was like an idiot. There were lots of drugs and I did drugs. I wasn't a drug addict, but I did drugs. And the rule was at the time, or at least this is what they told me. Who knows what the truth was? Like we have a rule that if you've done certain drugs within 12 months, you can't join. I personally think that the personality assessment tests I took, a lot of them, I'm sure you've taken these, with like 1,000 questions, and you have to answer true or false. Do you remember that?
You got to think about fuzzy bunnies to pass that.
So funny. I'll never forget this going home.
They would literally tell us that. Guys, just think about fuzzy bunnies when they're taking this test.
Those tests are insane. And I took mine at like Georgetown or GW University auditorium with all these, most of them were military guys actually, trying to move over into operations at CIA. And they told us, they sent me a letter, so bring a number 1 pencil, which was a mindfuck, but I didn't realize that. So I say to my father, I have to bring a number 1 pencil. He's like, well, you better go to the stationery store. We lived in Georgetown on Wisconsin Avenue and see if there's a guy walking there. I was like, I'd like a number 1 pencil, please. And I'm like, there is no such thing as a number 1 pencil. So I go home and I say to my father, I'm like, I couldn't get a number 1 pencil. And he's like, well, just try it with the number 2 pencil. So I show up and we sit down in this giant auditorium to take all these tests, and like all the military guys, they're so like, gotta follow the rules. Oh, excuse me, sir, I couldn't find a number 1 pencil, and everyone's like, I couldn't either, And I'll never forget the CIA guy administering the test is like, you couldn't find a number 1 pencil? Okay, well then I guess a number 2 will do. And I do think it was like an elaborate, mindfuck. But anyway, you answer these questions as and I'll never forget, one of them was, and they're repetitive. They ask you the same question in a different form. And one of them was, I am fascinated by fire. I'll never forget that. And I went home and I said to my father, I was like, Pop, one of the questions was, I am fascinated by fire. Like, you'd have to be a fucking lunatic to say yes, because you're clearly a psycho, right? And my father, who knew a lot about this subject, goes, yeah, but the psychos don't know they're psychos. So it reveals like through repetition and there's a time limit. You don't have time to think about it. You just have to all this, of course, but it was amazing. Anyway, I didn't get into CIA, and thank God. I would have been awful, and I don't agree with the mission. So the whole thing would have been terrible. So I'm so grateful I didn't. And then I was getting married, and I didn't have a college degree. I was a senior in college, and I was like, and my father-in-law, who's a good man with a job, was like, you need to have a job before you marry my daughter. So I went to my father, as usual, and I was like, and I applied to work in a boarding school in Morocco, and they were like, no. I just wanted to do something interesting. And he's like, you should go into journalism. I did that. I didn't have any credentials, but I could write. I was literate. And I said, okay. So he got me a job at his assistant's wife worked at this magazine, so I got a job as basically a fact checker at this magazine, and I loved it right away. That was August of, I got back from my honeymoon and went to work. I'd never really had a job when I went on my honeymoon. I worked at a gas station.
Where'd you meet your wife?
First day of 10th grade at the boarding school that we went to. Her dad was headmaster. And I had been there in 9th grade, and she showed up in 10th grade. We got a switch of headmasters, and I was standing on the quad. I'll never forget. I was like, whoa, holy shit, that girl's cute. Wow. And so I was just on that, like that. I was just on that, like right away. September 23rd, 1984. I'll never forget that. I was like, wow. I was actually dating someone else, but I was like, that's the girl.
Wow.
Yeah.
You remember the day. That's awesome.
September 23rd, 1984. I'll never forget it. And I was like a very non-ideal person. I mean, I'm like kind of an asshole now. I was really an asshole then, like actual. It's like super arrogant, dumb, doing drugs, just being like a complete overbearing jerk. Arrogant, really arrogant. And which is my nature. I try to fight it. But but we just had this weird chemistry, so it worked.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.